Welcome to Smallville Meets Krypton. So glad you're back. Hopefully the cliffhanger from last week didn't throw you off too much or make you angry you wanted to leave. But so glad to continue this journey and continue on this series as we dive into a little bit about my experience, and then we get to dive in to hear other people's perspectives. Before we jump in and continue the story, I wanted to share the perspective of Luke. Luke, who has been my best friend for so many years, and was the one who dropped the bomb on me and said, "Hey, you're adopted." That was something that I'm sure was hard for him. It was something that I'm sure he'd wrestled with all his life. And so I wanted to hear his perspective. So I interviewed Luke, and I'd love to share that with you now. All right. So first of all, tell us your name.
Luke Ellis.
How do you know me?
I know Colby from meeting him as a kid. I think I was 12, 13-ish or something like that. Met him for playing games. Andy Butler introduced us.
I like how casual that intro is, because the truth is it was like a drug deal. It was like,
Yeah.
Luke comes over to my house, and we meet outside and sit on the steps near the front door of my house, and we both sift through each other's games and determine which ones we feel like are worthy of our trading, and then and from there it was just.
I believe Colby was eating something at the time, doing this as he's looking through discs. He's all and he was eating something with his bowl haircut, with your bowl haircut around his dyed blonde from all the time he spent in St. George. So, and you were looking through discs. So
yeah, it's probably getting crumbs all over your stuff.
It was a drug deal for kids back then that were good kids that had to go to church every Sunday. So that's what it was.
That's right. Superman or Batman?
Oh, Superman.
How long have you known that I was adopted?
Oh, let's see. I think since I was like 14, and I'll be 41 this year. So, I mean, that's been a lot of years. Like 14, 15.
Okay. So. Who told you?
I think it was my Aunt Barbara told me. Like when we were kids, I remember going to my Aunt Louise's up on Durfee Street, and she's like, "Yeah, Colby's adopted." I'm like, "No, he's not." She's like, "Oh yeah, I remember when he was brought home. He was adopted." I'm like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yep, that's how I found out." It's my Aunt Barbara told me.
Okay. Favorite Weird Al Yankovic song?
Oh, geez. There's so many of them. Yoda is a good one. Was it Sweet Michelle? What's the one that it's hard because I remember the songs, but I always remember the names. I mean, White Nerdy's a good one. There's so many of them. So.
Okay. Who else did you tell that I was adopted before I found out?
So everybody, that's the hard part. Everybody knew that you were adopted. I remember, do you remember when you rode in the trunk of James's car in the back? Do you remember when you rode that?
Yep. The Studebaker, the old Studebaker.
Yeah, so all of us were having a conversation one time. I think you were in the trunk as we were talking about how, like, Rachel, Orgel, James, Jake, me, Megan Butler, I think that we all were having a conversation that everybody had known that you were adopted, and it was just like this big secret that everybody in Grantsville knew that you didn't. And I remember saying, like, he's got to know, right? He's got to know, that he is, but not really knowing how do you tell. It's not really feeling like, it's your place to tell somebody. So.
It's so funny because the more as I dig into this and the more I talk to people, the more I kind of question my own ability, like deductive reasoning. And I'm just like, man, maybe I'm just so clueless and I just couldn't figure it out. But anyways, it just makes me laugh because of so many people who knew. What's your favorite Disney movie that has like an adoption story?
Favorite Disney movie that has an adoption story? Oh, geez. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say which ones you think really that you think about that have adoption stories on them.
When you're in my perspective too, you start to recognize and realize that almost every single one of them is some way or another connected to adoption. But anyway, sorry.
I'm sure. Like I said, I'm sure. Like I said, I couldn't imagine. But like I said, I don't know which one I'd say would be my favorite adoption story. Like I said, it's hard because I've never really thought of, you know what I mean, when you watch them, like that story, like that you're adopted. So,
Yeah. Um,
um,
I would think for you it would be Tarzan. That's one that
yeah,
I think because you liked that movie.
I did like Tarzan. Tarzan was a
Yeah,
good one. But I'm trying to
and
think, like I said,
that's like the epitome of adoption. And in fact,
adopted, but
one
adopted
of the
by apes.
yeah, exactly. Well, one of the songs that is in there is one that's used a lot in the adoption community that a lot of people share. And so, last one, the rapid fire: open or closed adoption?
Open or closed adoption?
Yeah, which camp are you?
Oh, an open adoption.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's jump into the two most meaty questions that everybody's looking for. So the first one is, why didn't you tell me?
Well, I'd say you have to know Marilyn to know why we didn't really say anything. So,
Okay.
um, I we wouldn't have been friends if we probably would have said something to the kid because and kind of plays into everything as we got older because your brother-in-law also told me that you'd been told in elementary school you probably don't remember and you'd gone home crying and your mom had told you it wasn't true. And knowing that story that your mom was that determined to not let you know, we would have told you when we were younger because I don't think it didn't cross our mind many times over. Like I mean, Jake had many discussions like about telling you, and knowing that your mom would not let us be friends, we didn't. I didn't say when you were younger. So really, so
Hmm. Okay. Um, and the night that I got my DNA results, so what I remember is I was on the phone with Lisa, and you and Michelle walk in and start having a conversation with Hayden. Um, and then I finish the conversation I have with Lisa, and I turn and I come and sit by you, and I'm like, Luke, dude, check this out. I got my DNA results, and nothing matches up. I think I'm adopted. Um, what was going through your mind as I'm explaining this, or even as you walked into the house? Because I think Hayden said something to you first, right?
yeah, Hayden did say something to me first, and like I said, I remember when you said you were going to get it done. I remember you telling me a few
Oh, so
weeks
you remember when
before.
I told you about getting the DNA
Yeah,
test?
I remember
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, I know it's finally going to happen. Kobe's finally going to find out that he's adopted. You know, because like I said, me and Jake many times had the conversation about telling you. So I'm like, it's finally going to happen. So when I came in the house, I remember hearing you talking to Lisa, and you're like, nothing matches up, Lisa. Nothing. I don't connect to anybody. I remember just talking, and Hayden's like, I'm like, oh, what's going on? And he's like, oh, Kobe just got his DNA, and he's laughing. He's like, he found out he's adopted. I'm like, I remember saying like, yeah, kind of, yeah, always kind of known he's adopted. And Hayden all looks at me like, looks around. I remember looking like this, and like, what do you say at that point? My wife
Yeah.
Michelle, she goes, he's joking, he's joking, he's joking. I'm like, oh, he's joking. So like I said, I thought you figured it out at that point. You know what I mean? When Hayden was joking, like you really had found out that you were adopted at that point. So I'm like, yeah, you know, I've known for quite a while, like you know, that he has been. And I remember, like I said, you getting done talking to Lisa, and then coming sitting down. And she's like, and I remember you telling me, you're like, dude, I'm like, what's going on? You're like, oh, I'm like looking at all this stuff, and nothing's connecting. And I remember I sit and I said to you, actually, I said, do you want me to tell you something that we've known almost your whole life that I've known? And you go, and I could tell you're nervous, anticipating, not knowing what's going on because I mean it's like an life altering, just you know, thing for you, not
Uh-huh.
knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's when I remember saying to you, like, you're adopted. Like, you're adopted. I've known since we were kids that you're adopted. We just never knew how to really tell you what was our place. Like I said, how to really go. And then when it gets to that point, beyond like the point of 8 years and years, decades go by, you're like, how do you tell somebody? How do you say, hey, you know, you're adopted? So, um,
So roll back for me just a few minutes in that scenario as I'm on the phone and you realize Hayden is joking. Your wife is like, no, 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 you don't understand. He's joking. No, this is not public knowledge yet. And so now you have to make the decision. You have to decide, am I the one to tell him, or do I just keep playing coy like everyone else and let him figure it out? Um, what was going through your mind? Like, did you as you kind of dealt with that thought?
So, like I said, for years it was something that really bothered me because we've been close friends for how many years, and I
Yeah,
didn't say nothing. And my biggest fear was like if you had a medical thing and not knowing what medically, honestly, you to look at, and like at that point, I knew it was almost upon us, that I can actually tell you and not risk anything else. You already are going to find out anyways. And I knew at that point, if I didn't tell you, your mom would give you the runaround on. You would have had to go through so many other different avenues of trying to figure it out because she'd say something got mixed up, some because I said I love your mom, but that's just how she is. She wanted to live in this world that you weren't adopted, that you were, like I said, her son. So at that point, it was for me. It was just basically like that. At the time is now to tell you because you already got your DNA. You know that something's not matching up, and I've known for a long time, and it's time to let you know because, like I said, that turmoil had come previously in the past. So about telling you and not knowing the opportunity to do it. So
awesome. So then you share with me this life altering information, or confirm to me this life altering information, and even as you left, I I didn't believe you. I thought Luke's crazy, or his Aunt Barbara's crazy, or Chris was always someone who kind of made things up, or stretched the truth a little bit. And so I'm like, it's not real. I just can't believe it. Um, but you go home with Michelle, and what happened in that drive? What happened after you left? Like, oh, I just dropped a bombshell on Colby and I'm leaving him. Like, what went through your mind?
like I said, we actually went to Red Eight because we love that
Oh, that's
place.
right, because you guys hadn't eaten dinner.
We went to eat dinner actually after, and I'm like, and this is the crazy part because I feel bad because I'm like, I'm sitting across from my wife Michelle, and I'm like, he took that fairly well for finding life altering news. She's like, he was in shock. He was in shock. That's how we're going. I'm like, no, I think he's fine. And I'm like, she's like, no, Colby was in shock from what you told him. I'm like, you think so? She's like, yeah, that's how our conversation went. Colby's in shock. I'm like, so I felt bad at that point because like I just dropped it on you, and I don't think that you knew which direction to go or what to do at that point. And I'm just like, something I known forever. I'm like, whew, kind of felt like a weight off my chest, almost like letting you know what I'd known our whole lives and never really told you about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, the conversation was casual, but except for my wife, like, you were an idiot. That's just my wife. Not that she didn't want me to tell you, but like to drop it on you because it was the first time you met my wife. And she's like doing this the whole time. I'm going to tell you, and she's like, because like I said, it just. But yeah, that's like I said, our conversation was that's how it went. It's basically that I thought you'd taken it very fairly well, and she knew you were in shock from hearing it.
Huh. That's awesome. You took that pretty well. Um,
You know how I am though. Going like, oh, he's
oh.
good. It's all good.
Did you tell Jake that night?
Yes, I called Jake on the way home. I'm
Okay.
trying to
And
remember
how
what
did?
he said. I think he told me I was an idiot too. So Jake did,
Yeah.
and like it was, yeah. Well, it's like I said, it didn't for so long just because it didn't feel like it was our place. But I'm like, it was the time was right. I said he got his DNA and he needed to get some verification that that's what it was. And like I said, how many years have gone by? There's something medically. How would I have felt if something medically would have went wrong and you'd had to go through hoops to figure out you were adopted because nobody would tell you because you wouldn't know your medical history and you had kids too. You know what I mean? That their dependency now on medical stuff is dependent upon what knowledge wise of family history. So
Yeah. Which is, yeah, it's a very relevant point. So I'm glad you point that out. And um, I think about a lot, the idea of, what if Luke didn't tell me that night? What if Luke wasn't there and didn't tell me? And um, would I have, well, how long would have taken me before I finally got a confirmation that it was true? Because initially I didn't want to say anything to my mom and dad because I'm like, I wasn't sure. I'd still, I mean, I'm looking at DNA results, scientific DNA results right in front of me, but I still didn't believe it. I didn't believe that it was true. it just didn't make sense. And so I thought, this isn't right. Something's wrong, something's off, whatever. Maybe no one in my family's done a DNA test because they're afraid of DNA or something. I don't know, but I just, and so I wouldn't have pushed it. I wouldn't have kept asking questions if you wouldn't have been there, and if you wouldn't have told me and confirmed for me. Even though when you said it, I'm like, I don't think so. You're crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
believe it. Um, but I think it's important for everyone to recognize and to know that you didn't just drop it on me and then leave. I share this with everybody, but it's the fact that every day afterwards, for I feel like it was the next like month or two, you would call just to check in. Are you okay? Are you okay? How are you doing? And I think and so share with me kind of your thoughts there. Like, were you worried that I was gonna like crash and burn? Was Michelle just like, hey, you need to make sure he's okay and doesn't like go off the deep end or something? Or what was going through your mind there?
No, I think that it was more or less, I wanted to make sure, like I said, that you're okay. I know it was a life altering thing, and I wanted to see like where it was leading you to, like where it was going to go, like for you, like how, if you're going to get confirmation, like maybe because it did cross my mind that maybe people were wrong, maybe my aunt was wrong, maybe, you know what I mean, because you still think that still went through my head, and I was, wanted to make sure you're okay, because I knew it was a lot for you to take into, and then make sure constantly, like, okay, did you get people to acknowledge, that this is what's gone on in your life, to find out whether I was wrong in the process as well, that what I'd known my whole life, you know what I mean, because for me just as well, like, you want to make, oh, really, is he? I don't, his mom says he's not, so like I said, I wanted to make sure you're okay, as well as, find out how your journey went, to find out like if people would finally go to you, because like I said, I know it'd been something that had been kept from you for so many years, but most people were going to keep it tight to the cuff. They weren't gonna give up anything they didn't have to, or do anything else. So, as I was checking to make sure you were okay with it, and getting the information that everything was okay, and find out whether I was wrong in this process too.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that even you, knowing what you've known your whole life, when something that like this big hit, even you were kind of wondering, like, kind of almost a little bit second guessing yourself, like maybe he isn't adopted. Maybe not. Like, because now it's real. Now it's out in the open, and now it's like, if this is real, we've just exposed and opened up a big can, and I hope that we opened up the right can, or we hope
Yeah.
this isn't a bad thing, right?
Yep, and like I said, the confirmation a little bit for me was still that you got the DNA and you didn't match anybody else, but you still, like I said, second guess yourself. You still, like I said, and don't want to cause problems for people that weren't necessarily there before, especially for somebody, although we've been friends for so many years. Like I said, I care about how it turns out for you, and what you find out, and that everything ends up being okay for you. Like I said, because and like I said, I remember you being, because you were still in shock, probably weeks and weeks later, as you were dealing with it and understanding it, so,
Yeah.
and trying to figure it out, and then trying to get people that I remember talking to you about your conversation between your mom and your dad, and stuff with your sister, and cousins, and so, it was a process that I wanted to hear how it was going to go for you, and how you were going to deal with it too, to make sure that you're okay.
Awesome. Luke, thank you so much for sharing with me and with the rest of the audience just kind of more about your perspective and what was going through your mind, and what you experienced. And I love you, man, and I'm really grateful for what you shared with me that night, because I think it made all the difference. So thanks, man.
You bet. Love you too, buddy.
So there you have it. There is Luke's experience and his um, perspective on what happened that night. Now, if we continue the story, Luke and Michelle decide to leave and go get some dinner. So they head out. Hayden has already head out at this point, and so now I'm kind of left at my home to process and think through this. I hadn't sent anything or shared anything with Maggie because I was so excited. I felt like I had it to tell her in person. But as I sat there, I just tried to make sense of it all. I tried to understand, like, am I really adopted? Is this real? Like, all I could think of is, this isn't real. This is a dream. I'm missing something. But at the same time, deep down, I knew it was real. And in so many ways, I felt like it finally provided me with clarity on who I am, or at least some sort of understanding of why I have felt so disconnected for so many years. So I sat there and tried to think about, where am I going to find answers? Where can I go to get some information about the situation? And I didn't want to alarm anybody, so I was trying to do it all carefully and cautiously. So the first thing I did is I sent a message to my mom, and I said, "Hey, do you have a copy of my birth certificate?" And she responded yes, and a few minutes later emailed me that, or sent me a text message with a screenshot of my birth certificate, or a picture of my birth certificate. And I looked through it, and sure enough, and I remember vaguely having looked at that birth certificate a long time ago when I was a little kid. And I remember it's showing my mom and dad. But sure enough, she sent it to me, and birth mom, it showed her, and birth dad, it showed him. And which is so fascinating. And I've learned so much about that whole process and what that means since then. But at the time, I was just wondering, I don't understand, why does it show that? And so maybe Luke's crazy, maybe Luke's wrong, I don't know, maybe he's I just didn't know. And I just sat there trying to figure out what to do and where to go. So finally Maggie shows up, and I tell Maggie, I said, "Maggie, I am adopted." Now you can imagine what is coming from her perspective and what was on her mind through all this. And we'll definitely hear from her perspective soon. But for now, just know that she was shocked, and she was just as floored as I was, that this was true, that I was adopted. So we talked about it a little bit that night and tried to process it and think through it. But how do you process something like that? How do you take 36 years of living and understanding and digging in? Even recently, I'd spent some time digging in to genealogy and family history, and trying to understand that, and then receiving this news that, guess what? Your family tree isn't what you think it is, and your genealogical makeup, your biological makeup, all the things that you'd heard when you were a kid, all the stories you'd heard of how you looked like so-and-so, or you acted like so-and-so, or you sounded like so-and-so, all of that was not true. All of that was part of an effort to make you feel included, part of an effort to make you feel like you're part of the family. And while I appreciate the sentiment and the desire to keep me feeling like I was part of the family, there were some concerns and feelings of frustration that began to come because of this. But I didn't want to let that overcome me, because as I learned this, and after Luke had left and I was processing things, and that night, the only thing that became so prominent in my mind and became the driving force as to why I wanted to find my biological family was because a short time before, about a year before, I'd become a father. And when Calvin was born, it was by far one of the most powerful and wonderful moments of my life. It was an experience that I will never forget, and an experience that I will always cherish. And being a father, knowing how much I love my son, I couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for my birth mother to have to give me up. Now, I had no idea the history or the story behind that. There'll be more on that to come, I'm sure. But I didn't know what was the story or why. All I knew was that if I was in her situation, I would want to know what happened. Every birthday, every holiday, every year, maybe even every single day, I would ask myself, where is my son? What has happened to my son? And so with that in mind, I felt an overwhelming desire to find my family, to find my birth family, to figure out where I came from. And I didn't want to do this because I was trying to run away from my adopted family. I did this because I felt like I needed to, like it was a deep sense of urgency that I needed to do this. Maggie and I got ready for bed, and before I went to bed, I thought I'm going to try one more thing. And I thought of my cousin. I have a cousin who lives in Nevada, and I sent her a message, and I said, "Hey, cuz, I recently took a DNA test and got my results back, and I'm pretty sure I'm adopted. Can you shed any light on this or have any information you can share with me? I know this sounds random, but anything would be helpful." That was it. I sent that off and went to bed and tried to go to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and looked at my phone and saw a message from my cousin. And all she said was, "Wow, I am really sorry you had to find out that way. I vaguely remember something about that, but had forgotten about it until you brought it up." She says, "I'm happy to talk to my mom and ask her if she knows anything." To which I said, "That would be fantastic. I'm not angry. I'm not angry at anybody. I just want to understand. I'm just trying to find answers." And I kept saying that. I kept telling people that, and I kept trying to project that idea that I'm not angry. I just wanted to understand the truth. I just want to know the truth. And I think that's the core of why we're here today, why I'm here today, and why I'm sharing this with each of you, is because I want to know the truth, and I want other people to share their truth. So we continue forward, and I get in the car and head to work. At this point, I know I'm adopted. I know that it's true. What Luke said is true. What Chris talked about with Luke is true. All this is true. I sent a message to my sister, and I said, "How long have you known?" And she said, "I've got to get the kids to school, and then I'll call you right after this meeting." And I know she just texted that, so I don't know if that's exactly the tone or attitude of it, but I can imagine if she wasn't shocked the night before when I called her and told her about my results, I'm absolutely sure that at this point she was floored as to, like, how do I handle this? So I jump in the car and I prepare to head to work, but I end up heading towards my mom's house instead. And so I sent a message to my mom and said, "Hey, can we go to lunch?" And I start heading to her house. I invite my dad to join us. And shortly before I arrive at my mom's house, I get a phone call from my sister. And we only have a few minutes, but she says, "Ask me anything." And the first question I asked was, "Well, how long have you known?" And she said, "Well, I've known your whole life because I remember when they brought you home." And then she would continue to remind me, "I always have thought of you as a brother, always thought of you as my brother, never thought of you as anything different." And I am grateful for that. And I recognize that. And I think that that's part of the reason why this was so shocking, because so much effort was put into ensuring that I never felt like, or that I always felt like I was part of this family. Like it was just, that was who I was. That finding out that I was adopted really shook a lot more than it maybe should have and needed to. Whereas if I would have known my whole life, or at least most of my life, it wouldn't have been such a shock to the system. And so I don't know. Maybe if I would have known most of my life, maybe it wouldn't have been such a shock to the system. But unfortunately, it was. And so my sister says, "Ask me anything, I'll tell you." And I said, "Well, I don't have too much to ask, and I'm just pulling up at mom's house, so I can call you a little bit later." So I hang up with her, and I'm sitting outside my mom's house, full of anxiety, curiosity, and maybe a little bit of frustration. Finally, I get up, I get out, and I walk to my mom's house and sit down with her and decide, and we kind of have some small talk. And before my dad shows up, I explained to her, I said, "Mom, as you know, I took my DNA test and I got my results back. And I've asked a few times before now that if there's something I should know about, now is the time. But now I know. Now I know that something is up. So tell me what happened. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this show. I'm so grateful to have you as part of our audience. And if you have some feedback, thoughts, ideas of things that we should talk about, or questions that you want me to answer, please add them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Have a great day.